Resistance, resistance, resistance. This is Politics as Usual with your boy Juice Warner, and this is Old York Gritty. You know, don't forget to check out my book, Street Skillsy, Knock 'em Out the Box, as well as go to some junkie apparel, and support the channel. Anyway, we about to get into entering the Scottish Rite. Now, I've already explained to you what hypnosis is, right? And what mesmerism is. So I explained to you the tactics that they use for technology, right? In order for them to pull you in. Now, in this, we got other parts to that. We're going to go back into the devil's workshop. Yeah, I gave you a lot of his tools, right? But there's still more. But, as we were progressing, it's time to move into, the people behind this so you could understand, right? So we explained to you that there's a system of technology that they actually put in place for you to accept in everyday life, right? And inside of that technology, now they can determine what information you have, right? And so, they got this thing called, the School of Common Sense, and we went into all of that. But we will be going back into a lot of this stuff. So as we continue, don't think that it's just the end. There's still more. There's always more. All right. So entering, hold on, let me move over here. All right. So entering the Scottish Rite, right? Many Freemasons are curious as to what is the oldest Masonic lodge in the world. Many believe that Mother Quelling, right, in Scotland, is the oldest particular, as it holds number 0 on the roll of the Grand Lodge in Scotland. But Mother Quelling claims that most of its early records were lost in the fires or other disasters. We actually, with actual evidence, Lodge of Edinburgh number 1, Edinburgh is the oldest lodge in the world. This lodge is sometimes known as Mary's Chapel. The oldest Masonic lodge minutes are dated 31st of July, 1599 CE, and it's 410 years old. Right? So you see Mary right there, right? And you see the Masonic symbol over it. Because if if I go to the second page, to the hold on, let's see if I can zoom in here real quick. All right. Okay. So just so you can have an idea what this is. Okay. Okay. So if you look at the design of it, right? If you look at the design, you can actually see the compass and square, right? You can see it, right? It's right here, right where the man is at the bottom, right there, holding it, and it goes up, and you see it through the flowers. Technology, the subliminal message, which you see. I've also explained that this is a vagina. Right, and if you look, you can actually see it more better right there in the second picture, and this one right here, right there. So when we say Mary's Lodge, right, Mary's Chapel, right here, right, Understand. As you know, Mother Mary, you know, all of this. Understand what is being placed in front of you. All right? Let's bring this back down. We can continue on. All right? Okay. So, more impressively, the first 5 pages of minutes incorporated the Score statutes, which are dated 28th of December 1558 CE. 6 months later, on the 31st of July 1599, are to be found the minutes which confirm the lodge's claims as having the oldest existence Masonic minutes. The Score status are named after William Shaw. If I'm saying that right, Shaw, Score, whatever the fuck, I don't care. Who was master of works in his majesty, King James VI, and general warden of the Masonic craft. In the statutes, he declares that these ordinance issues by him for the regulations of lodges considered the Lodge of Edinburgh to be for all times the first principal lodge. And this is coming from King James, right? And General Warden, you know, His Majesty, and he was the General Warden of the Masonic craft. So he's telling you this, and like I told you who his mother is. So we're going to get into that. Lodge of Edinburgh, number 1, was first called the Lodge of Edinburgh and retained this name until 1688, when the Grand Lodge of Scotland confirmed the charter in the 1730s and distinguished the lodge as the Lodge of Edinburgh Mary Chapel number 1. Right? Prominent members belonging to the lodge in its very early days included His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, and afterwards called King Edward VII, and His Royal Highness King Edward VIII. Both were affiliated with the lodge, taking the obligations of the Breeches Bible, which was printed in 1587, right? It's called the Geneva Bible, you know, was the Bible of the Protestant Reformation and the Bible of the Puritans and Pilgrims. It was the first Bible taken to America, brought over in the Mayflower. The Geneva Bible is the Bible upon which America was founded. It was the first Bible in English to add numbers, verses to each chapter in Scripture. Okay? So that's what you're running around today with those numbers and, you know, people who pointing to this. This came from them. All right? The pen which these two brethren signed the roll is still preserved in the Edinburgh Lodge number 1 Museum. Okay? Excuse me. As early as 1600, the Lodge of Edinburgh began to admit non-operative Freemasons. In June 1600, the Lord of whatever was made a speculative member, the first authentic record of the making of such a member. And this is in the 1600s, right? When the Grand Lodge of Scotland was established on the 30th November 1736, the Lodge of Edinburgh took an active part. 33 lodges. were represented at the meeting, which was held in the large room of the Edinburgh Lodge. Because the oldest minutes of the lodge was that of Edinburgh Lodge, it was placed first on the roll of Grand Lodges, of the Grand Lodge. All right? So now let's move over to King James 6 and 1. All right? King James 6 and 1, James Charles Stewart, 19 June 1566 through the 27th of March 1625, was King of Scotland as James the Sixth from 24 July 1576. I'm not going to do the number part. I don't even, just July of 1567. And King of England and Ireland as James the First from the union of Scotland of the Scottish and the English crown on March 1603 until his death in 1625. The Kingdom of Scotland and England were individual sovereign states, which pay attention to that part right there, okay? Because you hear like the Moors and all of them talking sovereignty, and okay, understand where they're getting it from. England were individual sovereign states in their own parliaments. Judiciaries and laws through both were ruled by James and personal union. Though both were ruled by James and personal union. James was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, and a great-great-grandson of Henry VII, King of England and Lord of Ireland, right? And thus a potential successor to all three thrones. He succeeded to the Scottish throne at the age of 13 months, after his mother was compelled to abdicate, right? And pay attention to that part right there. This right here is very, very important. Okay? Pay attention to that. In his favor. Abdication is the act of formally relinquishing monarchical authority wait, hold on, let me fix this little space right here. I'll just ignore it. Anyway, for different regents, a regent from the Latin regions ruling, governing, is a person appointed to govern a state temporarily, basically temporarily, is your time being, because the monarch is a minor, absent, incapacitated, or unable to discharge the powers and duties of the monarchy. For the throne is vacant and the new monarch has not yet been determined. Let me see something here. Governed during his minority, which ended officially in 1578, though he did not gain full control of his government until 1583. All right. In 1603, he succeeded the last Tudor monarch of England and Ireland, Elizabeth I, who died childless. He continued to reign in the three kingdoms for 22 years. The three kingdoms, this is their trinity, right? A period known as the Jacobean era, until his death. You know how I do? I like to just give you a little insight on certain things that you come across. The Jacobean era was a period in English and Scottish history that concluded with the reign of King James I of Scotland, who also inherited the crown of England in 1603 as James I. The Jacobean era succeeded the Elizabethan era and preceded the Caroline era. The term Jacobean is often used as a distinction of styles in Jacobean architecture, visual arts, decorative arts, and literature, which characterized that period. Right? So, after the union of the crown, he based himself in England, the largest of the three realms, from 1603, returning to Scotland only once in 1617, and styled himself King of Great Britain and Ireland. All right, hold on. You can't see my rag here. It's green. Yeah. Anyway, so where we at? He was a major advocate of a single parliament of England and Scotland in his reign, right? The plantation of Ulster and English conclusions, colonizations of the Americas began. Okay, he was the major advocate of the single parliament of England. In his reign, the plantation of Ulster and the English colonization of America began. Right? The plantation of Ulster, the Irish, was an organization colonialized, providence of England by people from Great Britain during the reign of King James II. Most of the settlers or planters came from southern Scotland. In northern England, their culture different from that of the native Irish. Small privately funded plantations by wealthy landowners began in 1608. While the official plantation began in 1609, most of the colonialist land had been confiscated from the native Gallic chiefs, several of whom had fled Ireland for mainland Europe in 1607 following the 9-Year War against English rule. The official plantation comprised an estimated 500,000 acres of arable land and countries, right? These are the places where they were at. Land and countries, was privately colonized with the king's support. All right. So I'm just saying this part. I'm reading that because you hear a lot of people, right, try to compare, the Irish to the blacks. Oh, yeah, they was like the niggers, and no. Mm-mm. It had nothing to do with red hair or because they were blacks and, all of this nonsense. It had to do with religion. And so they went in there and basically found a way to give Ireland a fucking problem. So I always, don't get it twisted, I've always respected Ireland from the time that I knew about them with the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. And I watched them, basically put in a lot of work, wasn't afraid to, get their hands dirty. And I always respected them for that. But now at times I hear people running around, oh, they were, the blacks, and no, they were not. Cut the nonsense, okay? At 57, At 57 years and 246 days, James' reign in Scotland was the longest of any Scottish monarch. He achieved most of his aims in Scotland, but faced great difficulties in England, including the Gunpowder Plot in 1605 and repeated conflicts with the forgive me there, wasn't checking my clock and let that let the what's the name slide through. All right, so forget that. Anyway, we about to get back into it. I'm gonna go right back into where I ended, so we can just read that from that part again and continue on. All right. At 57 years and 246 days, James' reign in Scotland was the longest of any Scottish monarch. He achieved most of his aims in Scotland, but faced great difficulties in England, including the Gunpowder Plot in 1605 and repeated conflicts with the English Parliament. Under James, the golden age of Elizabeth literature and drama continued with writers such as William Shakespeare, John Donne, Ben Jonson, and Sir Francis Bacon. Pay attention. Francis Bacon comes up a lot. I'm trying to tell you, pay attention. Contributing to the flourishing literature culture. James himself, as a prolific writer, authoring works such as Demonology, 1597, Demonology, and full demonology in form of a dialogue divided into 3 books by the high and mighty Prince James and Company, was first published in 1597 by King James VI of Scotland, later also James I of England, as a the psychological distinction on contemporary necromancy and the historical relationship between the various methods of divination used in ancient black magic, right? It was reprinted again in, where we at here, 1603, when James took the throne of England. This included the study of demonology and the methods demons used to bother troubled men. It also touched on topics such as werewolves and vampires. It was a political yet theological statement to educate a misinformed populace of the history, practice, and implications of sorcery, and the reasons for prescription, a witch in a Christian society under the rule of canonical, forgive me, I don't know that law. I know what it is, I just don't know, messing up on the words. Canonical, right, law. Here we go. This book is believed to be one of the main sources used by William Shakespeare. And wait, let me highlight that, because as you see, he comes up a lot. Remember, he was down with the hypnosis team. Remember with the music and all of that, and the production of Macbeth. Shakespeare attributed many quotes and rituals found within the book directly to the Weird Sisters. Also attributed the Scottish themes and settings referencing from the trails which King James was involved. All right. The True Law of Free Monarchy. This is another book he wrote. In 1568, The True Law of Free Monarchy, or the Recuperative Mutual Duties between a free king and his natural subjects. Originally Scott titles, whatever, right? We ain't gonna do that to ourselves. A treatise and essays of political theory and kingship by James VI of Scotland. I keep thinking Scottish. Later to be crowned James I of England too. Also. It is believed James VI wrote the text to set forth his ideas of kingship rather totalitarian, in clear contrast to the Constitution viewed expounded by, among others, James' childhood tutor Greg Burkham, and died, Scots, that held the idea that monarchs ruled in accordance to some sort of social construct. Right? We hear that a lot, right? We hear this word a lot. If you've been paying attention, you hear, the social construct a hell of a lot. Where we at? With their people, James saw the divine right of kings as an extension of an apostolic succession, as both not being subject by humanly laws. James, right? Because this is how you see. Remember, you have Shakespeare, a writer, right? Pay attention to the structure of the Bible. As we go on, think if you really read the Bible and you follow this progression of certain stories, pay attention to the development. All right. Okay, King of England. No, I don't think I read that. James VI had his work published in 1598 in Edinburgh in the form of a small octavo pamphlet. It is considered remarkable for setting out the doctrine of the divine right of kings in Scotland for the first time. Another octavo education was published in London in 1603, the same year of James' coronation as King of England. Right? And Bascocone, Doron, right, whatever that is, right? He sponsored the translation of the Bible into English, later named after him, the Authorized King James Version. Sir Anthony Weldon claimed that James had been termed the wisest fool in Christendom, and empathy associated with his character ever since. Since the latter half of the 20th century, historians have tended to revive James' reputation and treat him as a serious and thoughtful monarch. He was strongly committed to the peace policy and tried to avoid involvement of religious wars, especially the 30-Year War that devastated much of Central Europe. He tried but failed to prevent the rise of hawkish elements in the English Parliament who wanted war with Spain. He was succeeded by his second son, Charles. The 30-Year War took place largely within the Holy Rome Empire from 1618 to 1648, one of the most destructive wars in European history. It caused an estimated 4.5 to 8 million deaths. While some areas, right, see that right there, right? 4.5. See that right there? To 50%, I'm saying 50%, to 8 million deaths. While some areas of Germany experienced population decline of over 50%, right? Germany, had because of this, right? Their population was cut in half. So if you don't see, a lot of the problems in which you see today, affecting the population, then I don't know what to tell you, right? Okay. Related conflicts included the 80-Year War, War of Mantoux, Secession, and the Franco-Spanish War and Portuguese Restoration War. All right, so let's get into childhood. All right. Birth. James was the only son of Mary, Queen of Scots, and her second husband, Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley. Both Mary and Darnley were great-grandchildren of Henry VIII of England through Margaret Tudor, the oldest sister of Henry VIII. Mary's rule over Scotland was insecure, and she and her husband, being Roman Catholic, faced a rebellion by Protestant noblemen. During Mary's and Darnley's difficult marriage, Darnley secretly allied himself with rebels and conspired in the murder of the Queen's private secretary, David Rizzio, just 3 months before James' birth. All right, so Darnley is bumping off the wife's personal secretary, the Queen's secretary at that, private secretary. So I guess, he's thinking he slided up at probably was really James's father. Who knows, right? James, that's what I'm starting to think. Right? James was born on 19 June 1566 in Edinburgh Castle, and as the eldest son and heir apparent of the monarch, automatically became Duke of Rothesay and Prince and Great Steward of Scotland. 5 days later, an English diplomat, Henry Killigrew, saw the Queen, who had not fully recovered and could only speak faintly. The baby was suckling on his nurse and was well proportioned and like to prove a goodly prince. He was baptized Charles James or James Charles on the 17th of December in 1566 in a Catholic ceremony held in Stirling Castle. His godparents were Charles IX of France, representing, whatever, and Elizabeth I of England, representing by the Earl of Bedford, and all of these other people, right, represented by. Mary refused to let the Archbishop of St. Andrews, whom she referred to as a poxy priest, right, spit in the child's mouth, as was then the custom. I gotta make this. I gotta make this bigger. I'm sorry. Right. spit in the child's mouth, as was the custom. The subsequent entertainment devised by Frenchman Bastien Pages featured men dressed in satre and sporting tails, right? In which the English guests took offensive, thinking that the saties done against them, right? This is what they basically referring to, all right? All right. So this is basically, what they dressed up like. You see the horns, they say either like, I think it was like a goat or a ram's horn, and they had the tail on. So they dressed up like this, and, the people of England took it as an insult, like, they was getting at them. You know what I'm saying? So let me bring that back down here. Hold on. All right. James' father, Darnley was murdered on the 10th of February in 67 by Kirkle's Field, Edinburgh, perhaps in revenge of the killing of Rizzio. James inherited his father's title of Duke of Albany and Earl of Ross, right? Mary was already unpopular in her marriage on 15 May 1567 to James Houperon IV, Earl of Bothwell, right? Who was widely suspected of murdering Darnley, heightened widespread bad feelings towards her. Your husband got killed. The man that they think killed them, you marry. Mary was already unpopular of her marriage on 5th, right, to James Houperon, 4th Earl, right, who was widely suspected of murdering Darnley, right? Heightened widespread bad feelings towards her. In June 1567, Protestant rebels arrested Mary and imprisoned her in Loch Levine Castle. She never saw her son again. Have mercy for the widow's son. All right? She was forced to abdicate on the 24th of July in 67 in favor of the infant James and to appoint her illegitimate half-brother James Stuart, Earl of Monterey, as regent. So basically, he was the one who was first deemed to look over, King James. All right. So I wanted to just stop because, we got like 3 more minutes before the next break. So I want to bring out the fact of while we're going through the Scottish rule, right? As we go into this, I'm gonna make a cause I got a thumbnail made up already. So I'm thinking on the next thumbnail, I'm going to add the Game of Thrones back into this, right? So as we're going, I want you to, if you've seen the series Game of Thrones, think about the names of the people in the storyline, and you will see that it's following this story right here. Right. The care of James was entrusted to okay. The care of James. We got some more. I'll keep going. The care of James was entrusted to Earl and Countess of Mars to be conserved, nursed, and upbrought. In the security of Stirling Castle, James was anointed King of Scotland at the age of 13 months at the Church of Holy Roots in Stirling by Adam Bothwell, Bishop of Orkney, on the 29th of July of 1567. The sermon of the at the coronation was preached by John Knox in accordance with the religious beliefs of most of the Scottish ruling class. James was brought up as a member of the Protestant Church of Scotland. I remember his family were Roman Catholics, right? So they was like, yo, listen, this is a religious war. That's why I keep saying stop, this Irish was black nonsense, okay? This had nothing to do with that, all right? So this is a religious war. This whole thing, everything you see even now is a religious war. We will be getting into this. I will be proving this to you. All right. Let's take this break in another, let's say 5 seconds. All right. See, I got my little rag here. Forgive me. Right. So we back. Like I said, I'm making the request that if you have not seen the Game of Thrones, or if you do not remember it, this would be the wisest time to go back. Right? Now, I'm going to say this to you. If you've been following this long and you understand what hypnosis is, here's how I'm advising you to watch TV. Everything should be done in a straight line, meaning no interruptions. Don't watch other TV shows and movies. So that's going to be difficult considering the fact that you got 8 fucking seasons to go through. Right? But actually, that should be easy because, they only hour long. So say if you had 8 shows in a season, like shit, you could be over that in like a few days. You know what I mean? Just because, mind you would only be just watching that. You know what I mean? So that's what I advise. Remember, don't watch TV in the dark and do not watch TV laying down. Right? And, after a while, the things that I told you about hypnosis, you should be able to see it, the symbols and the things that's gearing your attention to fall into that train of thought. Right? So this is why I went through, the first stage first, showing you the hypnosis and all of that. Because when it's time for you to do your research, I wanted you to be free of what is being placed in front of you. So I told you the tactics that they use. So now when you are watching this, you should be more alert. You shouldn't be in a phase because now your mind is looking for things. It's not looking at it. It's not engulfed in the show. It's looking at the show and paying attention to what is being promoted. Suggestion is the key to hypnosis, right? All right. So let's go over to the next screen real quick. All right. Okay. We're gonna go and I'm gonna just read that last part again where it says what was we just at? Anyway. The care of James was entrusted in Earl and Countess of Mars to be conserved, nursed, and upbrought in the security of the Stirling Castle. James was anointed King of Scotland at the age of 13 months at the Church of the Holy Rood, right, in Stirling, by Adam Bothwell, Bishop of Orkney, on the 29th of July, 1567. The sermon of the coronation was preached by John Knox. In accordance to the religious beliefs of most of the Scottish ruling class, James was brought up as a member of the Protestant Church of Scotland. In the Kirk, the Privy Council selected George Beckham, Peter Young, Adam, Lay Albert, Abbot of whatever, and David, whatever, Lay, whatever, as James. You can read all of that if you want. Preceptors or tutors. As the young king, senior tutor Beckenham subjected James to regular beatings, but also installed in him a lifelong passion for literature and learning. Beckenham sought to turn James into a God-fearing Protestant king who accepted the limitations of monarchy as outlined in the treatise Dawn, whatever. We're not going to do that to ourselves, right? This is what was outlined. I'm going to bring up the treaties actually later, right? In 1568, Mary escaped from her imprisonment at Loch Levine Castle, leading to several years of sporadic violence. Right? The Earl of Monray defeated Mary's troops at the Battle of Langside, forcing her to flee to England. Right? Just understand this. Now, my whole thing is how didn't the king, get her back? He's the king now, right? But then we're gonna get into that too, right? We're gonna get into that, right? The Earl of Monray defeated Mary's troops in the battle at Langside, forcing her to flee to England, where she was subsequently kept in confinement by Elizabeth. On the 23rd, now this is what I don't understand. Why wouldn't James have just went to see his aunt, right? And he would have been seeing, his mother, right? Right. Well, I don't know if she's his aunt or great aunt or how you would put that. Where she subsequently was kept confined by Elizabeth. On right, Monray was assassinated by James Hamilton. The next regent was James' potential grandfather, Matthew Stewart, the fourth of Earl, who was carried fatally wounded into Stirling Castle a year later after the raid by Mary's supporters. Mary's people wasn't having it. Right? Mary's people were coming to get her son. Right? His successor, the Earl of Mars, took a vehement sickness and died on the 28th of October, 1572 at Stirling. Mars' illness, wrote James Melville, followed a banquet at palace given by James Douglas, Earl IV of Morton. Pay attention. Morton was elected to Mar's office and proved in many ways the most effective of James' regents. He made enemies by his rapacity. He fell from favor when Frenchman, right, Stewart, whatever, first cousin of James' father, Lord Darnley, and future Earl of Lennox, arrived to Scotland and quickly established himself as the first of James' powerful favorites. James was proclaimed an adult ruler in the ceremony of entry to Edinburgh on the 19th of October, 1597. Morton was executed on the 2nd June 1558, belatedly charged with complicity in Darnell's murder. Complicity. He basically looked the other way, said whatever, and so they basically said, nah, you got to get it. You know what I mean? So they basically ran down on him too. Morton was executed, right? Belated charges, Darnell's murder. On the 8th of August, James made Lennox the only Duke of Scotland. The king, then 15 years old, remained under the influence of Lennox for about 1 more year. All right. So let's see here. So, ruling Scotland. Lennox was a Presbyterian convert, but he was distrusted by Scottish Calvinists who noted the physical display of affection between him and the king and alleged that Lennox went about to draw the kingdom into carnal lust. All right, pay attention. Lennox was a Protestant convert. He was distrusted by Scottish, Calvinists who noticed the physical display of affection between him and the king, and alleged that Lennox went about to draw the king to carnal lust. King James was a part of the Smashing Keyboard Committee, basically. He was a part of the Smash Keyboard Committee, right? Lennox was I read that already. Okay. In August 1582, that became known as the Ruthven Raid. The Protestant Earl of Goring in Angus, Lord James into Ruthven Castle, imprisoned him and forced Lennox to leave Scotland. You hear this? In 1582, in what is known as the Ruthven Raid, the Protestant Earls of Gory and Angus, Lord James into Raven Castle, imprisoned him, and forced Lennox to leave Scotland. During James' imprisonment, 19 September 1582, John Craig, whom the king had personally appointed royal chaplain in 1579, rebuked him so sharply from the pulpit from having issued a proclamation so offensive to the clergy that the king wept. Right? After James was liberated in June 1583, He assumed increasing control of his kingdom. He pushed through the Black Acts and asserted royal authority over the Kirk. The, and denounced the writing of his former tutor Beckham. Between 1584 and 1603, he established effective royal government and relative peace among the lords. Ably assisted by John whatever, right? Who led the government until 1592. The eight-man commission known as the Octavian brought some control over the ruinous state of James' finances in 1596, but it drew opposition from vested investors and was disbanded within a year after the riot of Edinburgh, which was stroked by anti-Catholicism and led the court to withdraw the Lincoln temporarily. These names of these places, man. Hey, man, I can barely speak English. Some of this shit, you should have put me in it. You know what I mean? You don't put me through it. Okay. One last Scottish attempts against the king's persons occurred in August 1600 when James was apparently assaulted by Alexander Ruthven, the Earl of Gorey, his youngest brother, at Gorey's house, the seat of Raventine. Was ran through by James Page. John Ramsay, an Earl of Goring, was killed in the ensuing fracas. There were few surviving witnesses giving James' history of the Raventine. In fact, that he owed them a great deal of money. His account of the circumstances was unusually believed. Was not universally believed. Nigga, they kidnapped him and held him for a year. He goes over there, he said, hey man, they do this to me, and this man rocked him. Anybody with their right mind is saying, listen man, we get it. Them dudes violated you, you had to lay it down. Forget the money part, you know what I mean? You know, even though you hold the money, but regardless. Right? What we got here? In 1586, James signed a treaty of Berwick with England. And that ended his mother's execution. That in his mother's execution in 1587, which he denounced as a preposterous and strange procedure, helped clear the way for his succession south of the border. Queen Elizabeth was unmarried and childless, and James was her most likely successor. Securing the English succession became a cornerstone of his policy. During the Spanish Armada crisis in 1588, he assured Elizabeth of the support as your natural son and compatriot of your country. Elizabeth sent James an annual subsidiary from 1586, which gave her some leverage over the affairs of Scotland. All right. So we're about to take a break in two. So right, pay attention. Let's go back a little. Okay. No, not that one. Okay, now we do, now I'm going to point you to King David, right, in the Bible. If you know anything, if you follow like the story of of David in the Bible, you will see a lot of similarities in the two. Right? In the two, you will see a lot of similarities, like I said. And so when you go, and if you do, take the time to look at it, Game of Thrones, you would see this same scenario. I don't know the characters. To be honest with you, I was never an admirer. I'm not gonna say a fan because I'm not a fan of anything, but I was never an admirer of the Game of Thrones. I always found it to be, like corny. When you read history, I'm a historian. You know what I mean? So for me, like I could tell you about the time in the land of Egypt and all of that before, Islam was formed, and, the Babylonians, the Sumerians. I can get into, I'm just a historian. I love, studying the path of things. That's history, to study the path of things, right? The timeline path of things. Physical display of affection. So you just take the time, if you read, and we're gonna get into King Solomon and his followers, because again, this would be also in reflection to King Solomon, if so we'll be getting into it to make everything more clear. All right, I hate just leaving things open, but okay, we got 20 seconds left. Marriage, right? This is, contract between James and Anne of Denmark. Right? Bitch is ugly. Portrait of Anne of Denmark, attributed by John D. Kritz in 1605. We'll be back. We back. Politics as usual. Oh, y'all ready? All right, so we're about to get into this. We're about to take you back over to his marriage. This is King James' marriage. All right, okay. Let's get into this. Throughout his youth, James was praised for his chastity, since he showed little interest in women. After the loss of Lennox, he continued to prefer male company. A suitable marriage, however, was necessary to reinforce his monarchy, and the choice fell on 14-year-old Anne of Denmark, youngest daughter of Protestant Frederick II. Shortly after the proxy marriage in Copenhagen in August of 1589, and sailed for Scotland, but was forced by storm to the coast of Norway. In hearing that the crossing had been abandoned, James sailed to leave with a 300-strong routine of routine to fetch Anne personally, in what historian Dave Harris Wilson called one of the romantic episodes, the one romantic episode of his life. Okay. The couple were married formally at the Bishop Palace in Oslo on the 23rd of November. James received dowry of 15,000 Danish dalers and gifts of 10,000 dalers from his mother-in-law Sophia of Mecklenburg Gostro. After the, Essening of Copenhagen, in a meeting with Tycho Beach, whatever. I can't do these people's names. They returned to Scotland on the 1st May 1590. By all accounts, James at first infiltrated Oh no, I don't know what the fuck what the hell am I looking at here? Fascinated. Infatuated. Supposed to be something that's missing. With Anne in the early years of their marriage, seemed always to have shown her patience and affection. The royal couple produced 3 children who survived to adulthood. Henry Frederick, Prince of Wales, who died of typhoon fever in 1612 at age 18. Would that, in today's time, that wouldn't be adulthood, right? Wouldn't that be, 21 is adulthood, right? Elizabeth, later Queen of Bohemia, and Charles has his successor, and died before her husband in March 1619. Now, let's get into the witch hunts. I think I should put this up there. Okay, hold on. I wasn't sure how far I was going to go. I think I got a little bit more time I want to do. So, let me see. Go back here. Let's go to the headlines. Let's put this in there. The witch hunt. Right? James visited Denmark, a country familiar with witch hunts, sparked an interest in the study of witchcraft, which he considered a branch of theology. All right. Okay. Just go to my ticker real quick. I want to put this up in there for you. I'm sorry. Just in case anybody just comes along. You know what I mean? Okay. He attended the North Berwick witch trials. The first major precaution of witches in Scotland under the Witchcraft Act 1563. Several people were convicted of using witchcraft to send storms against James's ship. Most notable, Agnes Sampson. We'll be getting into her, right? James became concerned with the threat posed by witches and wrote Demonology in 1597, a tract inspired by his personal involvement that opposed the practice of witchcraft and that provided background material for who? Shakespeare again, right? Right? Whose name keeps popping up here once again? All right, hold on a minute here. Right? Shakespeare's tragedy of Macbeth. Right? And this is why you got to understand, like when you in school and they dealing with literature, they are dealing with this history here. And so they're bigging up themselves in a system that was designed for them to do just that. Right? James personally supervised the torture of women accused of being witches. After 1599, his views became more skeptical. And the later letter written to England to his son Henry, James congratulates the prince on discovering the yon little counterfeit wench. I pray God ye may be my heir in such discoveries. Most miracles nowadays prove but illusions, and ye may see by this how wary judges should be in trusting accusations. Right? So it says, Highland and Islands. The forcible delusion of the leadership of the Isles by James the Sixth, this is the fourth, in 1493 had led to troubled times for the western seaboard. He had subdued the organized military might of the Hebrides, but he and his immediate successors lacked the will or ability to provide an alternative form of governance. As a result, the 16th century became known as the time of raids. All right, this is what it meant. All right. See that right there, time of raids. Furthermore, the effects of reformation were slow to affect these people, driving a religious wedge between the area and center of political control in the Central Belt. In 1540, James V, had toward the Hebrides, forcing the clan's chief to accompany him. There followed a period of peace, but the clans were soon at loggerhead with one another again. During James VI's reign, during James VI's reign, citizens of the Hebrides were portrayed as lawless barbarians rather than being the cradle of Scottish Christianity and nationhood. Officials documents described the people of Highland as void of knowledge and fear of God, who were prone to all kinds of barbarous and beastly cruelties. The Gaelic language spoken fluently by James the Fourth and probably James the Fifth became known in the time of James the Sixth as Erse, or Irish, implying that it was foreign in nature. The Scottish Parliament decided that Gaelic had become a principal cause of the Highlanders' shortcoming and sought to abolish it. Okay, so are we becoming clear on? They gave, the Irish certain titles, right? They couldn't learn the same things they attributed to black people. That's the only thing, but their handling of the Irish is totally different. And that's why even in America, sure, they might have had problems, this, that, and the third, but it is different. So please, I say this to all of the Irish or black, and learn your history. Learn what you were talking about before you just, ramble on and say foolishness, okay? Scottish gold coin from 1609 to 1625, right? That's a little something there. It was against this background that James VI authorized the Gentleman's Adventures of Fife, a civilized to civilize most barbarous Isles of Lewis in 1598. James wrote that the colonists were to act not by agreement with the local inhabitants, but by extirpation of theme. I don't know. My fault. Their landing at Stony Way began well, but the colonists were driven out by local forces commanded by Murdoch and Neil McLeod. The colonists tried again in 1605 with the same results. Although a third attempt in 1605 was more successful, the status of Lona were enacted in 1609, which required clans chiefs to provide support for Protestant ministers to Highland parishes, to outlaw bards to report regularly to Edinburgh to answer for their actions, and to send their heirs to Ludlow, lowland Scotland, to be educated in English-speaking Protestant schools. So began the process, specifically aimed at the expatriation of the Gaelic language, right? Meaning basically they gonna wipe this shit out. The destruction of its traditions, cultures, and the suppression of its bearers, right? And the Northern Isles, James' cousin Patrick Stewart, Earl of Orkney, resisted the Statute of Lona and was consequently imprisoned. His natural son Robert led an unsuccessful rebellion against James, and the Earl and his son were hanged. Their estates were forfeited, and the Oakley and Sherland Isles were annexed to the crown. So the Irish beef, right, was that. So the Irish beef was exactly that. We're not gonna force you to accept things as they are. The theory of monarchy. We will be getting into this on the next show. This is where we will be ending on this, right? We got some other stuff that we will be touching on, right? Okay. As you notice, as you see, I didn't even do no highlighting or anything in here because this is where I was planning to stop. Right. So I do got more and there's more coming. Right. It's just that, I like to balance things out and give it to you and a decent amount of energy to, information to absorb. I know this be long and people don't really be wanting to hear this stuff. So you try to point out the things that are, valuable to them if they're gonna understand this system. There's a system set up. They came up with an idea the same way that they use, like they're using on the Irish to a degree, but the Irish were allowed to come into the fold. So then when they turn around and introduce the black man into this system, now he's allowed to be under that rule, under the Scottish rule. This is all a religious war. That's why you got the demonology and all of these other things in there. Because one system is used to control another system. The system of your beliefs control your daily actions. What you believe to be true or fake, right, is going to determine how you move. So if I can control what you believe to be real and fake, if I can remove everything that you had, your language, your dialogue, the way your culture and all of that, if I remove that, then that's lost. And now you are permanently under whatever I deem. So this is what I tell the people, and this is why I'm going in. We got people, with a plan, and it's coming into effect. So if you're not in tune by December, if you've been paying attention by December, you will have everything you need to know to, one, defend your brain, then to go after those who are attacking it. Because you can't know what to defend if you are unaware of the attack. This is a cold war, a silent attack. So there's no gunshots and none of those, even though those things will happen, but those would be more minute than the effects that they have put inside of you. So this is what I'm addressing. We're entering the Scottish Rite so you can have knowledge of a system that's not working for you, but working for them. So even if you got down with that system, remember, it's not working for you. So until the next time, people, don't forget resistance, resistance, resistance. We out.